HX50 offers a genuinely unique value proposition to people that have always wanted to fly. The number of people that wanted to fly really never went away, but we had a double whammy of factors that has essentially allowed the general aviation market to spiral into decline. Firstly, the lack of innovation, the lack of keeping the products up to date and aligned with customer expectations has really dampened down demand or the desire to fly. And then the spiraling costs, both to purchase and to operate helicopters, have meant that there's an ever decreasing proportion of the population that are financially able to fly. We fix both of those problems with HX50. So our price point, which is around half of our nearest competitor, is intentionally disruptive. Now, the challenge for us has been how we build a manufacturing business with enough of our own IP that we can make all the things that we need to be able to deliver the aircraft at the price that the market can tolerate. Not what we want to charge, the price that the market can tolerate. And that's what the HX50 program has really been all about. But it's not just about the purchase price. The other thing that you have to understand about buying a helicopter is that even if you can get the purchase price down, as we have, to a point where you could finance it for around the same price as a supercar, given that you can finance over a longer term, you've then got to live with the fact that aircraft cost a lot more to operate than a car. And so we had to get control of the operating costs to make sure we addressed the broadest market that we could. Now, there are two things that you really need to understand about operating costs for helicopters. For private owners, helicopter operating costs are dominated by the fixed element of costs. So depreciation is the biggest one, or calendar maintenance. They basically amount to the same thing. And then you've got your insurance, and then you've got your maintenance. And then for people that live in cities, they'll typically have hangarage. All of those things have to be paid for, whether you use the helicopter or not. So if we start with the biggest chunk of that, which is depreciation or calendar maintenance, traditionally helicopters would have had two maintenance criteria. One is if you use it, stuff wears out, and the other one is if you leave it on the shelf and don't use it and time goes by, stuff rots. And so we have hourly maintenance requirements and calendar maintenance requirements. Now, the problem with that is for private owners that maybe fly 50 to 100 hours a year on average over their ownership period, then they simply don't fly enough hours to make the cost equation driven by their utilization. The cost is always driven by the fixed costs that they have to bear, whether or not they use the aircraft. So what you've got is essentially an aircraft that you take the base aircraft, you spec it up with some options, and then the moment you buy it, the aircraft depreciates because you never really get your options back. So it's your first drop, like driving out the showroom in a new car. But then for aircraft with major calendar maintenance events, maybe scheduled on a 10-year or a 12-year cycle, then for a private owner, the value of that aircraft drops down to essentially a hull value over that 12-year period. And when you factor that huge depreciation over a limited hourly use, it gets really difficult to justify owning a helicopter privately. And that's a major disincentive to people. Then the other problem that you've got is that if you don't use your aircraft, it times out after 12 years, and then you're faced with this big bill just to be able to keep flying. And that too is a major disincentive. I've had countless people come up to me and say, I can afford to spend $500,000 on a helicopter, but I can't afford to lose $500,000, which is what the depreciation profile does. So what we've done that's fundamentally different for a light helicopter is, because we are no longer bound by an engine that has a 2,000-hour life, we've got a modern engine that has a 5,000-hour life, we can extend the number of hours that the aircraft can fly and build the whole overhaul cycle for the aircraft over a 5,000-hour life. Now, what that means is that for a private owner flying 50 to 100 hours a year, that's somewhere between 50 and 100 years of flying that you've got before you're going to wear the thing out. So from a realistic utilization perspective, over a typical 10-year ownership cycle, you are never going to see any significant depreciation because you've never flown enough of the hours off. Now, the other thing that's different about HX50, because we've gone for modern composite rotor blades, modern composite structures, and really sophisticated corrosion protection on all of the fundamental mechanical parts, then we're able to extend the service life of these components and handle the periodic inspections as part of the annual inspection that happens every year. So we don't have a calendar death date for the aircraft. You never accumulate this large calendar requirement to rebuild a major chunk of the aircraft. So that sawtooth depreciation profile that hampers the ownership financial calculation for a private owner is immediately eliminated. So the value that we provide to private owners is, firstly, they're never going to be able to wear their aircraft out because they physically can't fly enough hours in a lifetime to do it. So over the period they own the machine, they're not materially going to make a difference to the remaining time that the aircraft's got to fly before it needs an overhaul. So that controls that mechanism. And then without this looming 12-year or 15-year inspection, then we keep a much more stable residual. Now, of course, there are other things that affect the price or the resale value for an aircraft, and this is also very strongly in our favour because there is huge pent-up demand for HX50. As I said, we've sold almost 1,400 of these now. We have 4,000 or 5,000 more customers waiting in the wings for the engine to run or for the first flight. Then we will not be able to build these aircraft fast enough. We will scale the production facility as quickly as we can, but we're never really going to try and push production rates above 1,000 a year because the long-term demand will settle down after the initial rush is done with. So the fact that there will be pent-up demand and a long wait for new aircraft obviously supports the resale value of existing aircraft or the aircraft that many of our customers have bought speculatively to take advantage of that condition. So the resale values for HX50, given how desirable it is, the step change in performance and desirability the aircraft has over any of the competition, and the swing that we're expecting towards us once people perceive that the risk is taken out of the program after we've flown, will be palpable, and that will support resale values for a long time. So those are the two things that really drive the value proposition. This is a machine made for people that want to buy a personal helicopter, and we've done all of the things that you need to do to control the purchase price and the ongoing operating costs. And that really is the value that we're offering to the general aviation market to kickstart it back into life and to make helicopter ownership accessible and affordable to the largest demographic that we possibly can. But as with everything, once you solve the biggest term in the equation, the next biggest term dominates. And so the other two areas that you've really got to get control of are the insurance costs and the maintenance costs, because even if you deal with depreciation, those two costs are still very big numbers compared to owning a supercar. Now, one of the really special things that happens when you bring manufacturing in-house and you get control of the cost of producing all of these components, then it totally changes the philosophy and the way that you can support your product in the field. So firstly, if you take insurance as an example, if you're a conventional OEM of light aircraft and you buy your engine and you buy your avionics and you buy a lot of the clever components that go in, your sensors, your switches, your hydraulic, all the things that go in to make a sophisticated aircraft. If you have an aircraft that is severely damaged or written off and you have to replace that for the customer, or the insurance company has to replace that for the customer, then you've essentially got to buy a whole new aircraft at list price. So you're insuring the list price of the aircraft. If you make everything yourself, and the purpose of your insurance is to make aircraft ownership as cost effective as possible so that you can bring as many people into general aviation as you can, so that you can get the biggest number of people flying, sell the most helicopters that you can, then one of the things that you can do is essentially handle the insurance yourself, because it doesn't cost me as much to insure a HX50 as it would cost a third party, because I don't have to insure my margin. Okay, and so essentially by underwriting the insurance, by providing Hill insurance for all of our customers, we can dramatically reduce the second biggest cost that most new pilots have to face in owning a helicopter. We can pull the hull insurance down because we're essentially only needing to insure the proportion of the hull that we actually have to pay for. We only have to insure what it costs us to replace the hull, not what it costs us to buy a turbine engine from somebody else, a suite of avionics from somebody else, and all the other bits and pieces from somebody else. So by manufacturing everything in-house, you also have the capability to drag the insurance costs down dramatically, further compressing the operating cost of the helicopter. And the same's true of warranties, and the same's true of maintenance. Because we make the parts, we have full control over the inventory that we carry. And this is another important point, because this business is run by me, an engineer, I understand the need to carry stock and to carry inventory so that we can get parts to people wherever they are in the world off the shelf immediately. I don't have a series of bankers and accountants above me telling me to minimize work in progress, to minimize inventory, to get all of that off the balance sheet. We will carry the stock that we need to carry to be able to support our customers properly. And that is, again, a unique characteristic of a business that's owned and operated by an engineer that really, really understands the market. So in terms of the overall value proposition and the level of support we can provide to our customers, it is totally unparalleled, because unless you're prepared to make the engine, and unless you're prepared to make the avionics, and unless you're prepared to make everything that has a significant impact on the cost of manufacturing a helicopter, you cannot beat this value proposition. It's not possible. So yes, what we're taking on is a vast engineering undertaking, it's a vast commercial undertaking, but it puts us in a position where we really don't have any direct competitors for the general aviation private market and for people that want to own and operate helicopters for pleasure and for fun. And that's what we're all about, and that's why we do all of the things we do. We really want general aviation to thrive.